recorded. Feel free to turn your camera off, go on mute, change your name. It'll be as if you were never here. Okay. We like to send this content out to the people. And so give me a second as I just got a ping or two from people that say, where's the Zoom link? It was on the invite, the meetup, but hey, just in case. Welcome to our Agile Austin Leader SIG for September 3rd. We normally have a lot of people join from in Austin and the surrounding areas, the country, the world now, because we're on Zoom. But please, if you hadn't had a chance yet, go into the chat, put your name, where you're joining from. Are there any job opportunities you're interested in or you would like to share? Go ahead and feel free and share that. I already put something on the chat about a Scrum Master / Scrum Coach position that I personally am hiring for at PayPal. So if people are interested, you know, they might ping you afterwards or go and apply themselves now and to take it from there. It is an opportunity to connect in the Agile world. The Agile Austin Leader SIG is part of the larger Agile Austin organization. Not going to go into details about it, but I'd like to encourage everybody to go to agileaustin.org if you want to find out more about it, be a member. We've got about 5,400 people signed up on a meetup now, and we have a blast. We have a blast with not just this special interest group, but throughout the month, we have on average about 7 to 8 sessions. So if you're interested in some other stuff as, you know, Scrum Master, coaching, we have special interest groups specifically on that. And so I would encourage you just to, the easiest thing is just to sign up with Agile Austin on Meetup. So you get all the announcements. And save the date. We haven't sent the communication out. We haven't really put it on our site, but November 5th is our Keep Austin Agile conference. It's going to be on Zoom. It's a virtual thing. It's a half a day. And what is awesome about it is not that we have some global speakers that are going to be joining that are awesome. I just want you to save the date for now, November 5th. Okay. And two cool things about it is that we're not planning to make a profit off it. We're not planning to make anything off it. Anything that is donated or through the purchases of the tickets, which we'll keep very cheap, goes to 2 nonprofit organizations. The Thinkery, for those of you that are more Austin based, it's a children's museum that every time I go, I have a blast. Yes, I mean, I take my kids, but I take myself to the Thinkery and, you know, find out new things you can do with like water pumps and cylinders and all this cool stuff for the kids. So we're going to donate to that. And we're also going to donate to NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Central Texas. This is something that has had a lot more focus in the last few years, and we're glad to do our part in supporting to see how the community can better address mental illness. So that's the 2 things that we're going to do, support with all the money we make from the conference. Coming soon. Don't want to talk much about this, but we are going to like step it up from a 2011 site to 2021. We're going to do that, okay? The site, our logo, our membership portal. We're not going to be tracking membership on a spreadsheet after Tuesday. Like, this is big deal. This is a big deal for us, okay? It's incredible how we can be such a agile, forward-looking, innovative organization, and our house is not in order, right? There are those sayings that, what is it? The toddler's son has no shoes. Is that it? Is this something like that? Like, you know, it truly does happen. We haven't really focused on the innovation in-house, and that's something we're doing. Adding stingers to our clips that we have on our YouTube channel and more. It's like, we're going we're stepping it up to 2021, folks. Yes. You're here in the leader special interest group. Our purpose is just to bring people together to share knowledge and how to lead agile adoptions and transformation. Let's share, let's learn, let's hear from each other. I have been the facilitator of this special interest group for 10 years. Our anniversary is in November. 10 years of having to do this every month. And it's been an awesome journey. Max is my name, and I am an IT manager at PayPal. And by all means, you want to ping me offline, you want to talk about stuff about this or Agile Austin, feel free. We have a guest speaker every month. We're pretty much going to stay on Zoom. We meet the first Friday of every month, but shout out to our sponsor that gave us the venue when we did meet in person, which it feels so long ago, a year and a half ago. Agile Velocity, right? Terrie is here. I see you, Terrie. You're here. Terrie's going to be joining us today and presenting on organizational culture, discovery,
it has
and
become
growing.
a buzzword, but it does actually mean something.
I will have to mute you. I'm not going to say who I just muted, but I see you and you're muted now. Thank you. But awesome to hear from Terrie. She'll have the chance to introduce herself and to go through that. Terrie, you're joining us today from where in Texas?
Plano, Texas, near Dallas.
Plano, Texas. Yes, yes. Like we've got our Texans in the house today. And then we've got Kemi next month from Toronto. And then November, as I announced, that's the 10-year anniversary of this leader special interest group. I'm going to have a panel of about 3 to 4 folks that had been attending since 2011. Like, do you know those days before meetups and all this cool thing to track? Like, I actually had like a distribution list email spreadsheet, which the advantage of that, I was like, oh, look at that, Ned and David Hawks and Jeff Meyer. So bringing together some folks from back in the day to talk about what has the evolution of Agile and how we lead and promote it and all these things we do. How has it evolved in 10 years? If you think about 2011 to now, it's like incredible stuff. So for anybody that might be interested in hearing a certain topic or sharing a certain topic, do feel free. I've got people that I'm starting to line up for December and beyond. So feel free to contact me. Let's keep this fluid in the community. And now, with no further ado, let us transition to Terrie Wilson, who is going to talk to us about discovering and growing organizational culture. Terrie Wilson, woo! Snaps, clap. It's hard to get it going on Zoom, like the excitement and the clapping. Thank you, Terrie.
Thank you. So do you want to give me the screen share?
I will stop sharing and you should be able to take over and start sharing.
Okay. So I'm Terrie Wilson. I am a recent National Women of Color STEM Allstar Award winner. And I have been working in the world of agility for over 20 years. My first conversation about agility was with a group of contractors that were working with Texas Energy Systems. And if you're in Texas, you know what that is. That's our major energy provider. And they were in Works. And they were telling me about what it meant to be agile. That was in 1999. I was on the first Scrum team at Capital One in 2006 as a systems analyst, and I learned Agility 101 there and what it meant to estimate using animals and bugs. So I'm from the kind of the big explosion in the part of the country I live in, and since then I've worked at Bank of America, at Fidelity, at Wells Fargo, and now at Chase, as either in the early days at Capital One as a Scrum Master, and then since then as a transformation leader. I'm a certified coach. I specialize in, just recently passed my exam for Clifton StrengthsFinder, People and process change, that's the process certification. Agile scaling, a transformation certification as well, and the CSPO, Scrum Master, Kanban, and back from the very beginning of time for me, project management. Yes, I am a PM, though I don't use that much anymore. So I'm currently working at JP Morgan Chase. I'm a business transformation coach there and global technology infrastructure. That's GTI. We are the backbone. We brought Zoom to over 260,000 people at Chase. So today I want to talk to you a bit about growing and discovering organizational culture. And there's a reason I kind of start in the title slide you can see here. Hopefully you can see my screen. Are you guys seeing my screen? Do I have a yes or a no?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we
Indeed.
could see it.
And you see-
Yes, we are seeing it.
It's the first slide. Now let's see if you click to the next slide if we're following you.
Okay. So I wanted to say that I start with the word discovering because quite often we start with how to change instead of where are we and why. So we'll talk today a little bit about why culture matters, how to understand it, how to evolve it, becoming responsible for it, and how to make it real. So organizational culture is a group of values that are held within an organization and includes the way we intend to behave, our experiences, even our belief structures and future expectations. It's the result of a perception within a company that its employees share, or at least most of them. Now, culture, of course, matters to people. McGregor's theory why explains that people come to work desiring to feel valuable and they want to do a good job. And when we feel connected to our organization's goals, if we feel trusted, we enjoy work more and we're more creative and more productive. Now, there's large data sets that have been collected across multiple industries and multiple countries that show that positive work cultures are actually more productive. So that's data-driven proof, not just a feeling. For example, in the United States, about 550 million work days are lost a year just due to workplace stress, just from stress alone. Go ahead.
Mr. Nutty.
I think we need to mute someone.
Done.
Thanks. We also know that we have 60 to 80% fewer mistakes and accidents in more positive work cultures. And that translates into often a 50% lower health cost. Now that really matters. That matters not just to the org, but to the people in it. And of course, organizations, they care about culture too. It matters to them because it changes the way they're able to succeed as an organization. It allows them to see their change initiatives work more often than fail. And it gives them a competitive edge because in a positive work culture, people can pull together better and adapt to change faster and find new ways to succeed that really work. It also correlates by data, not feelings, to higher performance as much as 60 to 200% higher to shareholders. Sorry. So that means it changes the dynamics of profitability as well. Now, some of you may have seen this before. This colorful wheel here is describing different types of cultures. And you may find that you are in a more creative culture or an adhocracy, and especially if you're in a smaller org that's trying to get things done first. Maybe you're trying to break through into a market share or an industry, and you've got a guru kind of that's pulled this group of people together, created an organization, and they're the impetus of ideas. And you may also very easily recognize a compete or market-driven culture. And if you think of one of the easy comparisons, that's, Apple to Microsoft. They're in a compete market-driven type of culture. And their goal is not just to do things first, but to do things fast. They're trying to beat each other to the market. That's both are externally driven. One is focused on short-term approaches to beat their competitor, while the other is focused on breakthroughs. Now, the control, i.e. command and control, organization is something that most of us have all experienced and some of us still work in. And it's based on hierarchy, where you have a visionary leader at the top. They push down the vision to their line of leaders, who then pushes it down some more to other leaders and teams that execute on it. And their goal is to do it right, to try to follow that vision. So their driver is internal, that visionary leader. And a lot of times the work is more incremental. So if you think about the three we just talked about, there are reasons you may find yourself in that type of a culture. Now, a lot of orgs are trying to move towards a more collaborative culture, also known as a clan culture, where people do things together and they work on goals that are internal and long term, but they break the work down and work on it in smaller teams together. And they tend to have a little more flexibility. So before you start talking about changing your culture, it's good to kind of locate yourself. Where is our Oregon culture, and why are some of those things true about the way our culture works? Because there may be things about your current culture that are actually good that you want to keep and maybe evolve more towards a different part of this matrix without leaving everything behind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and Terry, very quickly, somebody asked about the stats that you shared in the prior pages that were very good, but can you share now or afterwards where they're from? Or do you call it out on the
I
slide
can
somewhere?
share where they're from.
Okay.
Yes. And so why don't I do this? I'll share the actual sources for each of them when I share the deck.
The
How's
deck.
that? Okay.
Excellent, excellent. And I very much appreciate that chart that you showed about the different cultures, because I feel that sometimes when people hear culture, there's sometimes a mentality of going straight to the collaborative culture, the person-to-person culture, when I can just share from my personal experience having to work at Whole Foods, which started to get a lot of the Amazon culture after the experience. It wasn't a very collaborative culture as it was before, but it was a very customer focused culture. It's almost that more like fast breakthrough to the customer. And that's what Amazon is just stellar at. And they will do anything they can do, even cannibalize their own services to actually get value to the customer fast. So it's different.
Right. And like so many things, it's not necessarily a hard line either or. Sometimes there's a bit of an and, right? Now, the metrics I talked about earlier, I will tell you, they came from McKinsey and from the Harvard Business Review. But I'll give you the specific credits for each metric. Now, let's talk about how we feel and understand culture. So we talked about culture models. Let's talk about what it's like to experience culture. It is both observable and unobservable. And you see the image of the iceberg. We use this a lot. So there's a lot that rides beneath the surface, right? Now, explicit behaviors and artifacts, things like that, those are things that you can understand easily. There may be your standards that are written into some HR information or guidance, trainings that you receive, even words that are used very specifically when describing your organization or how your brand is set up, and the agreements that you make about how you're going to work. If you're a global company that's got a large span of time zones, you may make some agreements about how you collaborate across those time zones. Or if you're a one area based company, you may make some agreements about what your core working hours are, things like that. Those are conscious contracts that you're making as a group and agreeing to. There are also spoken and unspoken norms. Who hangs out in the break room around what time? So I can kind of cruise through there and maybe chat somebody up about some ideas I have. Those are unspoken norms. Spoken norms are things like, how are we going to collaborate in a room? Do we all turn our devices off? Or do we leave them on with the understanding that we provide 24-hour support, but we're going to silence them? Or do we use chat or whiteboards? So those are kind of spoken norms about how we work together. Now, bias, though, especially implicit bias you don't even realize you're operating in, possibly based on some assumptions that may or may not be true, rides way beneath the surface in a culture. So, in order to understand your current culture and its impact on the people who work within it, there's some things you can do to learn. You can take a look at something called the organizational scan. It is a scan that kind of talks about how agile your organization is. It was put together by Bain & Company. You can actually go out to their website right now if you want, and you can take their scan. So you can take it as an individual and answer the questions and see what the scan tells you about what you believe in terms of how agile your organization is. You can also run this across an organization and collect the responses and get an understanding of how your people feel about your organization's agility. Not what your decks say, not what the training says, not what the coaches and the gurus there say. What do your people think about how agile your organization is? Now, these kinds of questionnaires, they're put together with a lot of psychological science in the way questions are asked to make sure you're getting a clear answer from the people taking the survey and they're not being led to an answer. So sometimes doing it this way instead of creating your own survey is actually a better approach because you're using years worth of science in how those questions are asked and answered. Another great one is the Fearless Organizational Scan. This is a collaboration between Harvard Business Review, or the Harvard Business School actually, and Amy Edmondson, who is well famed for psychological safety. Here again, you can go take the test yourself, or you can arrange to have it run across your organization. Now this one and the one I showed you before, I combined into a survey, and I ran this survey across enterprise workplace products where I work. And another one of my colleagues ran it across a different tower of work where I work. So we could see not just a combined view of how our people are feeling about psychological safety in the environment and agility in the environment, and we can also segment it and see, is there a different in different work streams. So this was run across about 4,000 people, and the results were revealing. Go ahead.
Sorry, Terry. This I find so critical, and of course, I take it for granted that it's normally an anonymous survey.
It is.
It,
Now, the way that I ran it was through SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey scrapes all information, IP addresses, all of that. You don't get any of it. It assigns a unique identifier to each person taking the survey. It's just an auto-generated identifier. It doesn't collect name or location or any type of information like that. That allows you to striate the information all the way down to individual responses or see it in rolled up views. But there is literally no personally identifiable data associated with it.
yes, and I think, and I bring this up because I feel that that is so powerful, because sometimes, and this, I actually had this conversation with a CIO at a point in an interview, and the CIO said, I don't like anonymous surveys because then I can't get a further explanation. It's vague or something. Well, then we talked about a specific example about, do people feel that communication is transparent and efficient in the organization? And I told them, if you see that the majority of people say they don't feel it is, that's a data point for you to
Yeah,
start with. You don't need to understand what examples people gave about in the Q3 all hands communication, or just know that the people have the perception that communication is not very transparent. It's not very not connected to what is happening in the trenches. Can that be improved? I think that people have to feel more at ease of dealing with anonymous data and having to be able to use it.
those data points that you
Yeah.
collect, that huge volume of information help you understand the landscape of the culture in your organization. You can then take that information, identify some data points that you want to dig deeper into, set up some focus groups, get some volunteers, people who want to come and talk about it.
Volunteers.
Not voluntold, volunteers.
Very
Right?
important.
Yeah, because when you force the conversation, you're not going to get an honest answer.
Yeah, it's a downward spiral. We have a question. Do you want to take the question now? Or so
Oh, sure, we can do it that way.
Heidi was asking, how are the results reported out? Would you be able to tell if there are particular pockets in the org with a less collaborative culture?
There are ways you can do that, and it depends on not how the information is collected. It depends on your choice of where you target. So by targeting two towers, like I said earlier, I was able to say this part of the organization versus that part of the organization. Now, in my org, I had the choice of 4 towers. If I were to take that a level up, it would be 12 towers. And then you can run the surveys individually and compile the data and look at it across different parts of your org
Yeah.
or across your entire org. So it's literally up to you. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
Yep, thank you.
Heidi, cool.
I've even seen it done at the small team level. So it really is dependent on what you're trying to do, right? So now what? You've run your survey, you've learned some about your current organizational culture, set up what you were purposely aiming for. You've learned something from the survey about where you really are in terms of what your people think and how they feel working in what you've created. So now you have the opportunity to take that information to decide, do we need to change? And if we do, well, what quadrant in that matrix are we trying to move towards? And once you've made that decision, you can develop a shared vision for your future culture that includes 3 elements of culture and start sharing that profusely. And you see them in the little Venn diagram here. Those 3 elements are the language, the norms, the beliefs, and values. And if you remember when we talked about the pyramid, the artifacts, those ride way above. Everyone can see them. You know what they are. They could be messages you painted on the wall. They could be statements in training documentation, in the way you introduce things in your town halls. Also, those conscious contracts, those agreements that you have with your team, you can evolve them. You can say, hey, we have this global structure. We've got people dialing in at 6 a.m. and at 10 p.m., depending on where you live in the world. Maybe we need to bifurcate that so we can make the way we collaborate a little more human friendly, say. And you can see how language and beliefs and values, they combine into those artifacts that you can display, your branding, things like that. And how the norms and beliefs and values, they combine into your conscious contracts. And of course, explicit behavior, kind of the result, the outcome of those things are visible and expressed in language and norms. Now, share it profusely is where sometimes we kind of miss the boat. You go through all this work, come up with all these decisions, create artifacts and conscious contracts and start driving that explicit behavior, and then we kind of stop talking about it like it's one and done. And it's not. It needs to show up in everything you do. So think of that survey we talked about earlier. Wouldn't it be great if you had a snapshot of kind of an overview of the major data points that were important? And in your town hall this quarter, you displayed that and said, hey guys, this is where we are, kind of a you are here map. And next quarter, we're going to run it again and show you where we've moved to, or if we've moved at all. So keep it going, make it part of what you do. So this is just an example.
Trends can be a very powerful thing. Trends can be a very powerful data point. Yes.
Exactly. And sometimes the trend down, if you're going the wrong direction, is maybe even more important than the trend up, because it can be a call to action, right? That everyone can understand and see. So this was just an example of what some of those artifacts could look like. This is an actual wall painting in an office somewhere where people are speaking into their organization, what they expect, what they want to be, and what matters. Has anyone seen things like this at work? Do any of you guys have anything like this up? Nope.
I haven't seen one in a while, like this. I've seen like mission statements, a few other things, like this is what we want to do for the world, but not in this particular setup.
When I worked at Wells Fargo, we acquired some new property, and we went to kind of survey it before starting the work to get it all cleaned up, redesigned, and moved into it. And there were these statements all down the stairwells. They weren't in, they were in the stairwells. And I found that interesting because evidently it was only like a 3-story building, and their culture, or the folks that worked there, had a tendency to use the stairwells a lot. So I thought that was a pretty cool adaptation. We'll put it where we know people are going when they're doing something casual, maybe something boring like walking up and down the stairs, and might want to read them.
Yeah.
So you've passed discovery, you're into action, right? There's something else that you have to talk about, and that's how people become responsible, how teams themselves change their behaviors to try to work in a new or an evolving culture. And in order to do that, you have to help people become responsible for encouraging that healthy culture. One of the things that is a really great way to look at that is something called the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's from a book, Coaching by Patrick Lencioni, and this is what it looks like. So it talks about core elements that are indications of how healthy your team is or where you may have dysfunctions. And it starts with the assumption that all teams, like all people and all families, have some level of dysfunction, and that's okay. But it's important that you recognize where it is and you work to improve it. So an absence of trust can be improved by being more human. You see, that's at the base of that triangle. That's where it all matters. If you don't have a team that can feel like they can work together like humans and have some level of trust with each other, you're kind of broken in a big way, right? And then you can see there are other elements you look up. You look at a fear of conflict or a lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, or inattention to results, procrastination, right? So you take your team into a coaching session, you help them understand this pyramid, and you run an assessment, and the team answers a series of questions where the goal of the question is to drive out, is there a dysfunction in any of these 5 areas? I ran this with a group of all of the managing directors in global technology infrastructure. And the results there were telling as well, where if you spoke to an individual, they might say, oh, we're great, we don't have any dysfunction. When the team ran the assessment and each person answered without the influence of the other, this showed something a little different. And I ran it in Mentimeter. So it didn't identify them, but they could actually see the results as we move from question to question. And you could hear the ahas in the room. I didn't know people felt that way, right? So a lot of the usefulness of this is just driving out the truth in a way people feel safe to say it. And then you can build plans around how you want to confront difficult issues, how we want to make people feel safe or even encouraged to challenge. Or how do we, work on some of our clarity? It sounds like we may need a little more agreement on what it means to finish something, things like that. So maybe you need a better definition of done, right? Leading teams with strengths. This is big. This is big for the individual. This is big for the team and for the organization. It turns what we've learned on its head. From the time we are children, almost toddlers, we are being taught to identify what's weak in you and make it stronger. That's how you succeed, by curing your weaknesses. But 50 years of research has shown that's actually not true. Has anyone ever done the Strength Finders handwriting exercise?
Handwriting exercise.
Yes.
I've done so many of these, like more character finders and stuff like that, but not the
Okay.
strength finders.
Well, if you guys have a pen and paper in front of you, do something very quickly. And this is easy. Write your name with your dominant hand if you're right-handed or left-handed. Just write your name.
Mhm.
Then take that same pen and paper and beneath it, write your name with the other hand. So if you're right-handed, write your name with your left hand.
Oh
It
my
will,
goodness.
and it will not be pretty for most of us unless you're ambidextrous. So what this is meant to explain is, now imagine how much effort it would take to bring the level of writing your name with your non-dominant hand up to a match of writing your name with your dominant hand. It could take quite a bit of effort to get there if you ever really do. But if instead you focused on the handwriting, the spacing, the legibility, and the time it takes for you to write your name with your dominant hand, you could make some immediate improvements, couldn't you? I know I could. So the premise of Strength Finders is, if you focus your energy on your natural talents, the natural strengths you already have, you have an opportunity to master them, to make yourself a superpower in those areas. If instead you focus on your weaknesses, you do have the opportunity to make small improvements. But those small improvements are not what leads to success. It's the mastery of what you already do well that makes quantum leaps and leads to success. Now,
And
go ahead.
Terry, this is such an important point. And I think that from my personal experience earlier on in my career, I was within a team, an organization that I really didn't feel there was a lot of psychological safety to share that, oh, there is this part of my job that I am not very talented at. It's not my strength. It would be awesome if I could do more on this other part of my job, which had to do less with maybe the technical aspect, but more the people aspect and stuff like that. But I felt that even when me being an outspoken character, even then I shared it, my management was very much, well, this is what we need right now. This
Mhm.
is what we need. You have to be a team player. You have to do what's best for the team. And this is what you have to do. So I felt as if I didn't feel safe to bring up the fact that, hey, here are my strengths and here I can actually probably add more value, maybe not within this team or even this organization, but somewhere else in the company. But to do that, there has to be a certain environment to be able to do that and share it.
There does. And what what Clifton Strengths Coaching does is it approaches 3 areas: the individuals, the teams, where you're going to find a striation of strengths, right? And the managers, what their strengths are, and how they can learn to use those strengths that are already inherent in them to create a better relationship with their teams and their team members, and to recognize how to use strengths that are inherent in those teams to create a team of rock stars instead of a team of people who are struggling to be something else, right? Now, of course, if you have a critical weakness that could be a barrier to success, that needs to be identified and strengthened. But those are rare, and it doesn't mean everything you don't do well. If you're doing something that is actually problematic for your team and yourself, then yeah, you
Like
know.
I'm never on time to meetings. Yes,
Yeah,
I
that's
have
not
to
what you,
address that weakness.
yeah, you have to address that. Or, I have this habit of screaming at people when I'm stressed. You gotta address that,
You
right?
gotta address that.
Yeah, it's probably something you want to do a little better with. But now, if you can see, and the example I have up there is kind of tiny because that's actually my results. That those are my strengths. What I want to call out is the first 5 are bolded. Those are the ones that you act in on a daily or a very, very prevalent basis. So they're core to you. You act in them without thinking of them. But you notice there are none that are marked in red text or lined out or anything, all the way down to strength number 34. And it's not called a weakness. It's a strength. It's just one of my lesser strengths, right? It's one I don't act in naturally. I can pull it out of my tool belt if I really, really need it, but I'm more likely to go to the 10 on the left. When you look at this across a team and you matrix it, you will likely find that you have people with strong strength areas in the 4 color bars or color indicators you see on the far right. And that's executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. I happen to lead with strategic thinking because in my top 10, the largest number of them happen to be in that area. But I do have strengths in all of the other 3 main areas. And if you look at your team's DNA, you'll see that if one person per se doesn't have a strength in woo, and woo is exactly what it sounds like, pulling people to you and energizing a group, you probably have someone in the team that has that strength. You don't have to have everyone in the team that has that strength. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yep.
There are other things you can do for people, and this one was mentioned a little earlier: growth mindset. So, growth mindset means I feel more comfortable raising my hand saying, I'm not good at this, but I'm willing to give it a try. I'm not going to master it, but I'll try, right? And I don't mind if I'll try and not look good in front of people. Growth mindset does require that you have a culture that has some psychological safety, right? So that you can feel good about running the experiment, trying something new. This is an assessment that's out on MindWorks. You can take it. It's free. It's anonymous. It takes about 5 minutes. And if you'd like to take it, you can go in 5 minutes to the website you see here, enter a little information. They don't care about who you are. You don't have to identify yourself. You can just call yourself none for the company, test for your title, or things like that. And then you'll get an email that gives you guidance on how growth mindset versus fixed mindset you are. And remember, it's a spectrum, right? Most people are not 100% growth mindset, and very few people are 100% fixed mindset. A lot of times it's situational. It depends on what the scenario is. You may be a little more on one side of the scale or a little more on the other side of the scale. When people take this assessment, they're able to get this feedback in their inbox quietly. It's just you and the assessment. There's no reason to share it with anyone. It's an idea for you to kind of locate yourself on that spectrum and make a decision. Do I want to move to be more growth mindset? I have some guidance here, some information that might help me do that. Highly recommend it.
Thank you
Now,
for sharing that. And it's
yeah,
just 5 minutes.
it's just
Awesome.
5 minutes. You can do it right now while we're talking. And the website is blog.mindsetworks.com. And you can go out and take the assessment. It's only 8 questions. You can answer that very quickly. And the faster you answer it, the more likely you're going to get good feedback. So don't overstudy. Just answer. First thought. Now, another one that people can do to take responsibility for their part of creating the type of culture that your organization is trying to move towards is one that talks about bias. That those thoughts that are running around in our head that we may be acting on and not even realizing the basis of them or the impact of them. This study is put together by the Harvard University group. It is a large global collaboration called Project Impact. The data is anonymized. You can go in and take any of the assessments out there as a guest and never plug in any information about yourself. And it will also send you feedback. I've taken several of them and I found some biases I don't know I had. Oh, I didn't know I had. And of course, didn't know is the important part of implicit bias. Once you know you have a bias, that's where you need to take your own personal action to mitigate it. Think about bias like a soft, silent, almost silent voice that speaks to you about things that you think you believe. Like, I definitely believed that I would not like a certain type of food. I believed it so much that I never even tried it until one day I did and I found I liked it, right? It's taking the action to change behavior that you've been acting on based on assumptions that were not true. But until you learn that you have those assumptions, you have no opportunity to change them. The test uses the speed at which you answer certain questions to detect bias. So don't study it, just answer the questions and be amazed. You may find you have zero bias in some areas that you were worried about, and that you have bias in other areas that you never suspected. And it is free. Now, this also serves the world because the data set is being built and used to help organizations that are trying to teach, coach, or influence the reduction of bias in all parts of the worlds we live in, work, home, school, finance, all kinds of things. So if you take the implicit bias test, you're actually helping the world. And again, this is not something you need to do internally with teams. This is something people should be encouraged to go and do for their own reasons to take more responsibility for the cultures that they are creating.
But since I have no biases whatsoever, there's no use in me taking it, right?
That's the bias.
That's the bias.
The bias that I am perfect, that's not even an implicit bias. That's a bit explicit.
Thanks for sharing.
So once you've done all these things, you've encouraged your people to take responsibility, you've worked within your organization to understand where you are now, why, where you want to go, some of the how, and a way to level set that information. You're going to set that intent by infusing your artifacts, your language, and your behaviors into the way you operate, the way you speak of your company, the way you train your people. So that's your language, norms, beliefs, and values. And then you need to baseline so you know where you are. Run your surveys, run your organizational culture measures, and put that information together. Put a stake in the ground and say, this is where we are now, right? And then repeat them. Don't walk away from them and forget you ever did it. repeat them, set them up on a schedule. Say, I'm going to do this quarterly, or I'm going to do this biannually. Whatever your organization can sustain in terms of surveying people. And do be aware, over surveying leads to people not really caring about what they're answering. They just start clicking anything. So you don't want to overdo it. Always keep it anonymous, and then visually use it. Use it in your presentations, in your gatherings, so that people are seeing that as a touchstone, a touchback. Visualization is hugely important in the journey to changing your culture. Make it real. Engage change agents. People like me who are crazy and willing to go out there and do this stuff and have a few people say, yeah, that's not going to work. But we'll keep trying. Those are your change agents. And you got to reward them. Sometimes reward can be simple recognition, having them speak about it in a town hall, right? Raising them up, supporting them in what they do, and protecting them when people say it's not worthy or won't work. Or if a little character assassination starts, that here comes that organization woman, she's always making us do stuff we don't want to do. Having leadership say, oh, wait, no, this is stuff we do want to do. She's coming to help. We've asked her to help. That matters too. That's part of making it real. But the biggest part of making it real is listening, responding, and changing your approach as needed based on what your people say, right? So don't just survey them, question and get answers back. So do the focus groups, do the raise your hand sessions in town halls, or the ask me anything kind of meetings. Do all of it. That's what I have for you today. We have
a couple of questions, Terrie. We could squeeze them in, but this was awesome. This was awesome. It's such a good thing to learn how you can further do some organizational cultural change. I like the survey stuff and having to do all that, the data points. Question from David. What if you think you have a strong skill, but somebody else thinks it's a weak skill? And the whole having to find out your skills and your strengths piece.
Well, part of the answer to that is first understanding what is it you're calling a skill. And strengths coaching includes a full definition of each of those areas of natural talents and skills. So if you have, say, the maximizer skill, and someone says, I think maximizer is a weakness. Well, there's a part of coaching the maximizer skill that can explain to the person with it that these are the areas where you act positively as a maximizer. But if you take it too far, it can have a negative impact. So if someone's saying to you, I'm a great maximizer, but you don't seem to like that, and you're saying back, yeah, because it's a problem for me the way you do this, it may mean that the person is overusing that skill. And overuse is something that your strengths coach will coach you on because it can lead you into a critical weakness. Anything overdone, no matter how great it is, can turn into a problem.
Yes. And it just takes that further conversation and understanding to boil down to it. Another question from Sherry was in regards to, you used towers when speaking before, like doing the different surveys to the towers. What is a tower? Can you give an example of what a tower is?
A tower is a way of talking about organizations. At Capital One, we use that phrase, and we do use the phrase at Chase. We didn't use it at Wells. So think of a tower as a division within a company.
That's what I thought too, yes. I think, hold on, there was Bill, I think you had a question at some point. Oh yes, okay, last question of the day. Drum roll. Bill asked, any learning on mixing types of cultures, like create, collaborate, like how could they be combined to then create a better common type, like better culture? Do you have an example? Do you have a story real quick?
I have several. I'm trying to pick one.
In 3 minutes.
Here's one. You may find that in some organizations that are highly technical, hard technical skills, the building of physical data centers, the building of physical buildings, pulling wire and cable through a building, hard tech, they are going to be more easily acclimated to Kanban because it is not a design method in agility. So the culture is different than a software development organization or part of your company that deals with user experience, with tangible UIs, logic trees that deliver decisions, things like that. But what if your team does both? What if your team builds a data center and also builds the UIs that people use to access data center logs or to make changes to data center configurations? Well, you need some of both, don't you? So in that case, you may have some teams that are running Scrum and some teams that are running Kanban. And the Kanban teams may end up coming across some of their work that they say, this is different. This takes a little design thinking. Maybe we need to just hand this over to our partners on the other side of the fence who are running Scrum. So you have what looks like a blend between what may be more of a command and control hierarchy dealing with hard technology that cannot afford experimentation, that cannot fail without taking the entire organization to its knees, and a collaborate group that's working on designing people software. So there's a reason you may see the two combined. Does that make sense?
Bill, yeah, Bill.
Okay.
That
Now,
made sense to me. And it reminds me of when you have organizations that just make, mandate all teams in the organization will do Scrum. They will start their sprint on this day and end their sprint on that day. I mean, I understand somewhere where they're coming from, but I don't understand how they think a cookie cutter approach can work for every team. I've never seen two teams that are the same. But that's another whole story for another time.
I was coming
yes,
from
but that,
another position, another situation.
Okay. Well, we might not have time, unfortunately, Bill. Maybe you can ping Terrie offline and
you
converse
can.
about that. Yeah.
And Bill,
Yeah,
you can find me
sure.
on LinkedIn at www.linkedin.com/n/T Wilson. I am always happy to chat with you on LinkedIn and answer questions or point you to things. And when we get the deck out, it'll have the links to all of the information you can see there. And you can see Harvard Business Review and McKinney are listed at the top. That's where those metrics came from in the first couple of slides.
Terrie, we will send this out to everybody, the deck. We will send the Zoom recording and also the Zoom chat. As long as you signed up on a meetup, I'll post it there and everybody will have access to that. We will conclude as we start on time, we end on time by saying, thank you, Terrie Wilson, for coming today and presenting to us all of this. The key thing is that we learned something new, and I very much felt that something new was learned today. Thank you for everybody that joined from all around Texas, the US, international folks from the UK,
Nigeria, from Nigeria.
always Nigeria.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a nice day, folks. Stay safe.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.
Terrie.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Thank you, Winston.
Thank you, Terrie. Have a good weekend. Happy Labor Day weekend.
This is great. You guys have a nice long one too.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.